Here's this agile thing with Mike Markey and Matt Beam, but not also Jeff Singleton.
Because there's some things that a lot of organizations we've seen kind of that fall by the wayside.
Totally. Yeah, it reminds me of the importance of getting everybody on a single unifying narrative. If you're doing something transformation shaped, I've found myself talking a lot over this past year about how processes don't scale. And,
Okay.
well, like the idea that you could, if you center your focus for the transformation on launching Scrum teams or training product owners and Scrum masters,
Yeah.
which is not, not without value, but there's a risk of a cargo cult type of pattern there. Like you can teach people to stand up for 15 minutes a day, but
they're just going through the motions. They're not.
yeah, they don't have any way to measure if this works or if something else would work better, or when it falls down, how to understand that why it fell down, or like how to. And it leaves them in no position to evolve their processes, right? If you understand that it's a daily planning meeting, it's as lightweight as possible, then if you find a new way to plan for the next 24-hour cycle, do that instead, as opposed to just answer these 3 questions and you can go.
Yeah. I really find the 3 questions kind of less helpful than usual.
It's a little tired at this point, isn't it?
Yeah. I prefer aiming them at what's our top priority and what are we doing? What can we do today to advance that?
Yeah.
Right. And then has everybody got something to do in association with that? If not, then let's move on to the next most important thing and have a discussion about that. And let's find something to keep everyone engaged.
Or instead of thinking about the people answering or centering the discussion from the people's point of view, think about it as if the work was coming to the meeting.
Yeah.
What does the work need?
Hey everybody, I am your highest priority story. What are you doing to make me done?
So first, let me just pause and highlight that. This is the first voice, I think. This is the first character we've had on the show ever. That's a first.
It could be. Yeah.
Was that a Muppet?
I don't know who that was.
Yeah. It can't be a Muppet because that's trademarked. What was I going to say? Here's some more sleep deprivation. I can't remember. But yeah.
Well, you said the work coming to the meeting.
The work coming to the team. Yes. Fair enough. That's all.
So how would you engage the team in that then? I gave you an idea.
Right.
I didn't say it was a workable idea.
Fair enough. The thing I was thinking about that I just remembered that I forgot I remember now is the work item aging would be a thing that I would elevate now that I wouldn't have elevated 10 years ago. I would say I'd start with, is anything been in flight for 3 days or 2 days or whatever your threshold is?
Yeah.
And so is anything on fire? Number one, because we all have to swarm on that, right? We know that's really kind of the most healthy pattern. Okay, if nothing's on fire, what can we get to done? Like, what's the next thing that's, close to done that could be actually created? What's the next thing we could all do that would actually create value? And there's probably going to be multiple things in that column, but not just what you're going to do, because that focuses on. Sorry, I should be on do not disturb. That focuses on, it encourages like being busy as opposed to being effective, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, I like there are things in some of the tools that you can turn on work item aging. You can get a visualization attached to it. I've seen like a number of dots that represent the number of days it's been in the current state. I've seen the one that I really liked actually changed the color of it. It became more aged looking. Like new stuff was white, but then the older it got, the more brown it got.
Totally.
Like this is an ancient document.
I really like that idea. That feels.
That was definitely a plugin that was not native behavior.
No, but that should be native behavior. That feels tactile and very human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, look how old and crusty this one's getting.
I could use the banana metaphor, like a green banana becomes
Ooh.
a ripe banana, and then it starts to get. Although that's bad because like the more a banana ages, the sweeter it gets, so it might be a little bit confusing for some people. In some cases,
no. See,
overripe
for me,
banana is
the sweeter the banana gets, the less appealing.
No, I'm gonna no.
See what I did there?
I did. I guess. What the hell? But that's because you're focused on not eating sugar, though, right? Is that
Well, that's true. The ripe banana is bad from a glycemic index, as opposed to the less ripe banana.
But it's delicious.
But no, too banana-y. Too much banana.
Try again.
It's too much banana.
Excess banana attribute. So I've got a question for you, unless you have another driving, burning topic that needs to be birthed.
Go ahead.
Okay. Have we talked? I feel like we talked recently about business architecture versus software architecture. Did I dream that? Why are I having such boring dreams? If yes.
I don't know. Well, maybe we did. But what of that subject piques your fancy?
Good verb. So
why is your fancy piqued?
Indeed. Let me check my fancy and my privilege. It's around the idea of value stream analysis, value stream mapping, having the system of delivery. We're talking about software here. And organizing around value. And the idea being that you, well, first of all, we know you're not just going to come in with a framework and install it. You're going to have to, if it's going to be valuable to the org, you have to understand what are your business domains, what are the logical ways to carve up your finance, accounting, sales, marketing, compliance, all of this stuff.
Oh, okay.
So the business domains, and then the software delivery system that has to line up to that. And so, assuming taking as an assumption, and correct me if you think this should be not the assumption, you start with the business architecture because obviously you think that's a good given, and then you have to map the architecture, the software delivery system to match that. Is there to make sure that you've got effective value streams, coherent logical value streams? Is there a technique? Is there a tool? Is there a facilitation shortcut? Is there a blog post? Is there a video? Is there a set of ways?
I don't know about a video, but I'd say there's a truism that can come to play. There's Conway's Law that says that if your organization is attempting to build a process or build a system, that the architecture of that system will mirror the communication channels of your organization.
Yes.
So in that sense, I think there is definitely a correlation between your business architecture, which is your communication pathways, and your architecture, your software architecture, whatever your product line is.
So there's
because
three things.
That might get organized around the way that we communicate.
So there's three things. There is the way that your business processes are set up. There's the way that your software architecture has been built, the systems and capabilities that have been created in code. And then there's the system, the organizational structure of the people, in that way you organize them into teams that build that software. And those could be all in sync, or they could be out of sync, or in any combination. Is that fair?
You're taking it to three things. So the third thing may mean that I didn't follow you on business architecture. So when you said business architecture?
I meant business processes. So the people, the departments, the way they talk to each other, the artifacts that they have outside of the software, like what they do.
As opposed to the business structure?
The way that the people are separated into functions in the business. the software system that has been created, where some stuff is accounting, some stuff is marketing, some stuff is operations, and then the group of people who create that software. And are they aligned to teams that align to the software sub-architecture, and does that align to the business? The reason I'm getting at this is because it seems complicated, and I think this discussion maybe illustrates some of the complication.
Well, I think a lot of I agree. There's definitely a complication in the fact that there's a lot of reused words, right? And so it's like the concept of product. If your organization already has a word, a usage of product, and then you come in and say, we're going to have a product owner, you better hope that your use of product matches that expectation in the model, because otherwise you're in a problem. And we had, I think when we were at one of our past lives together, we ran into that with program manager. Like the thought from a safe perspective of what a program manager is and what they called a program manager were two very different things.
Yes.
Or product manager, even, where you would say product manager is, what was it? XP wanted to call the product, the product manager was the what we would have called a product owner, because they don't have product owners.
Yeah, they would call it a customer.
Yeah.
Well, but that's because they wanted to pull the actual person who'd really be using the software in, and that would be that person, and that they didn't.
Oh, you'd like to think that's why they did that. That is not why they did that. They did that because they didn't want a scrum master and they didn't want a product owner, so they had somebody who was a both, and that was a product manager.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, there's so many different ways to understand this and instantiate. Yeah, I had an issue recently with the idea of a product, and it was in the context of along the lines of team topologies, streamlined teams, and platform teams. And the most simple, straightforward way for me to think about it is both of these teams create a product. For the streamlined team, they're creating a product for an external customer. Right? And for the platform team, they're creating a product for an internal customer, which is the streamlined team. And the unlock, that makes sense. The unlock for me is that you get to use the same product management principles and techniques and all of that stuff. Everything that you learned about creating products and managing products for external people who actually give you money, you can use that same approach for the product that you're vending to the internal streamlined team. And it's enormously clarifying, right? Like, what do they need? How to prioritize? How to understand what good looks like? I mean, in some companies, like, it's not always possible, but like in some areas, and I think I raised this earlier, you even have the sort of quasi-marketplace dynamics where if the customer doesn't like your stuff, they don't have to buy it, which doesn't always work, obviously. If it's compliance or it's regulatory, whatever, you probably don't want to allow that. But if it's something like version control or like some other technical product, like a streamlined team might decide to get something from Google. And then the question becomes, why are you being out-competed as a platform, as an internal platform team? Your product sucks, doesn't it? Because nobody's choosing to buy it. Yeah.
So in your experience, have you seen people make that transition? Because I can see where a streamlined team understands the concept of the customer. They see it's an external person, that these are the people who spend money for our product. They get all that, right? That metaphor works. And that's where the metaphor started. So that's why.
Yeah.
This platform aligned team is an adaptation that we've made to explain a relationship that wasn't accounted for in the original model.
Fair.
Right? So we've said, oh, well, yeah, you don't have a customer outside like the same thing, but you've got internal customers, right? So are you finding that people make the metaphorical leap easily, or do they get hung up on that's not really a customer, or
it's not really a product?
Yeah, that was my concern. But I agree with you. I totally think that is where the right way to do that is. is say the platform team is working for internal customers.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
right? But you get a lot of people who will, well, that's not agile then because it's not a real customer, or that's not, it's the same thing. We've got gates to actually put things out into the real world that we haven't solved for by developing our CI/CD roadmap yet, or we don't have these things in place. So we literally cannot ship at the end of a sprint. Therefore, we can't do agile. Like, no. You just adjust what delivery means. You're not delivering to the real world. You're delivering to the next stage.
Yeah, you find a way to get the feedback that you need to steer your next planning cycle so that you can get to that, whatever that is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So whether that's UAT or security testing or whatever it is, that's the new deliverable. That's your definition of done because you've taken it as far as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's it's just surprisingly confusing for people. I mean, it's fair enough. Like the agile thing itself is counterintuitive in some ways. It's just, the longer I spend in the industry, the more I think, number one, I got super lucky the first place I started, because my first place was an XP shop, and they'd been doing it and they'd worked it out, and I just got to soak it without understanding like how unusual it was. Test-driven development, automated testing, suites ran every night, customers, user stories, retrospectives, sprint reviews.
Yeah, so you always have this vision of what success could be.
Yeah.
As a yardstick to measure this, whatever you're looking at now against, and say, all right, there's still room for improvement. And I've seen improvement in the past. So maybe I can nudge.
Yeah, it's set me up to be more helpful places where they don't even you go to a retrospective and there's no action items. It's like, why?
Oh, wow, you get retrospectives.
Right. I feel bad sometimes because I'm like, guys, we are not there's a floor here and we're below it.
Yeah. And it's I hear you. I totally get that.
There's not to complain about the places I go or people I talk to. Like everybody's doing the best they can and there's smart people everywhere. But it's just I feel like as an industry, as an agile industrial complex, we could have done better. I don't know exactly how, but it's there's a lot more work to do. The state of the industry is not super impressive.
So is there a reason for that, though? Is
Gotta
there a
be.
reason that the industry is in that state? Because if we look at the industry at large, there's a bucket of practices that we could be leveraging. I mean, just looking at your XP experience. It is not to say those are the only practices you could do. These just happen to be a group that Kent Beck and others pulled together and said, we find these to be useful. Mm-hmm. Very useful.
We got good results.
Eminently useful, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you couldn't do, 14 of them? You couldn't do a 15th one? Right? There's no reason you couldn't add more to the pile.
14
Right?
what?
There's no practices.
In XP?
In the original XP. I think there were 14 that they named.
Boy, I don't remember exactly.
I could be off. My brain's also going, also could be 17. I don't remember what it was.
How about 19?
But the point being that there was a number of practices that were in the original definition of extreme programming that were recognized. Mm-hmm. And that isn't to say that you couldn't say, we're going to take this one and set this aside because we've got another one instead. Like XP didn't call for mob programming, but it did call for pair programming. So if you could swap in mob programming, that'd probably be a net win, right?
It's an extension of the same principle, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's a lot of things that you could do differently and still say you're following in the practice. So point being, this is where I was trying to go with this.
Here we go.
A lot of practices that are out there, and they don't all fit every situation. They don't all impact the same. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't as clean to go back to that cargo cult reference, it isn't as clean as saying we're going to airdrop a process on you that will be successful. Because the truth is we have to tailor the practice.
Yeah, and by definition, the way this works is not that we tell you what to do and then you do it. Because it's knowledge work. Like we could, if it was physical work, we could show you how to dig the hole and you could just do it. Just keep moving the shovel this way. But knowledge work requires you to exercise judgment and creativity and nuance and all this stuff. And so you have to understand why.
Yeah.
It's like
you
like
could
setting
also
you
argue
up.
though that
Yeah,
you could also argue your hole is not my hole. Like
leave that alone.
like I might have a very clay and gravel
Yeah.
land versus, which is going to require a different technique than somebody who's got a lot of sand or versus somebody who's just got regular topsoil. So there's still nuance to this.
Honestly, I'm uncomfortable anytime I separate between physical labor and knowledge work, because I think we've systematically devalued working with your hands in this country. Like I think there's a lot of people who are intellectual and theoretical and can't fix their furnace. And this is outside the. Is your furnace broken? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, okay, it might be.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say we've devalued, but I do think that there is, for some reason, I will agree that there is less. Okay, never mind. It's devalued. I'll just say.
I will clean up. I will say a lot of times working with your hands is a lot more complicated than it looks like, right? And there's very much room for craftsmanship and artisanship and all that stuff, and we brought that into software.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a good day that they pulled the craftsmanship and the artisanship, and that's what you got exposed to at your very first place, even if they didn't know that's what they were exposing themselves
Totally.
to. They didn't have a word for it at the time.
No, but they did it and they got results, and that should be the test ultimately, right?
Yes.
Does it work?
Right. So when we go into an organization and we're working with a client and we're evaluating or assessing where they are, we should be first asking ourselves, is what they're doing working?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then we can look at what practices are they engaging in that are getting to the working state, and do we know of any that might impact that working state? Right. And then have that conversation with them and say, here's a list of potential recommendations. Which ones do you like? Which is sending me screaming back to Conway's Law for a second. Because think of it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Your organization exists. This client organization exists. And it's built up over time to be a hierarchy of some sort with communication pathways of some sort, divided up into work groups of some design. I didn't want to sort again, but anyway, so you've got this existing structure and you've got management and oversight structures in place to support the existing ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Then you come in with an agile way of working. You say, we're going to airdrop Scrum. Boom.
You're welcome.
A little Scrum bomb.
Scrum bomb is a good way to think about it.
All right. So the Scrum bomb goes off, and Scrum tries to say, we've got a really simple definition here. We've got one coordinator, we got one definer, and we've got a group of people who implement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And the complex organization goes, but what about this? What about this specialty? What about this specialization? What about that? What about all of our complexity that we have evolved to have?
You don't understand.
What do we do about all that? And we stare at our simple model and say, you don't need all that, which is part of where we run into a problem, because they clearly need all that in their mind.
Well, it's there for a reason, or at least it was put in there for a reason at some point, and sometime it made sense. Otherwise, they're not crazy people. But
Yeah, so we run the risk of looking out of touch, or we're bringing in something that is, I don't know what this, we can't do that. And so if you at least demonstrate success with the small pilot of your Scrum bomb,
boom.
boom. All right. So the Scrum bomb goes off. It's still in the middle. And so I keep picturing this massive hierarchy tree, inverted tree thing. And then this tiny little seedling of agility glowing up through the middle of it, right? And then it gets bigger, and it tells two friends, and it tells two friends, and so on. And now you've got this little island of green in your organization of orange.
Deep
right?
cut.
Very
That was
visual,
a Breck
right?
commercial.
Okay.
30 years ago.
But
Breck.
then we need to scale that, and scaling means we need to bring more into it, and we go up and they say, aha, scaling, that's where our complexity can join the party. And if anyone has looked at the SAFe framework, that's where the complexity joins the party. That's where the architects join, and the UX people join, and all the other strange and wonderful people who do things that are not in the mainstream of nuts and bolts development. Right? So then they think, here's our opportunity to jump into the fray, and this is where the Conway's Law comes in.
Yeah, this is why they had those three things. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the Conway's Law comes in like this. Our organization is made up by a bunch of people who have a rank, a responsibility,
A boat.
accountabilities. They got all this stuff
With
they're supposed
payments.
to do. And there's all those folks down. Yes, they got boats and families and college and houses and boats.
There's a lot of stuff weighing on their minds.
And there's this little glowing ball of agility growing up in the place that is a complete alien concept to the way that they run things. And when you start talking about what the next scaled level of that agile seedling would look like, they still don't see the complex solution around that they have around them, and they reject it. They right. And so there's antibodies that come into play. And so you can watch people who are trying to define a new way of doing business, right? And we honestly we hear this transformation thing is good. Let's see if we can define what our flavor of this is going to be. When they look at the glowy seedling and they say, that makes me feel uncomfortable because that doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to make it feel more comfortable. And the more comfort they inject into it, the more it begins to resemble the old way.
Death by comfort injection.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
So I think that's, whether it was intended or not, that's where I find the cautionary tale of Conway's Law, right? Where
It's like reversion to the mean.
Yeah. Beware.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be forces drawing you to that, and they're going to be well-meaning forces. This makes me feel icky. That makes me feel comfortable. Choosing between the icky and the comfortable, I will go comfortable every time. And if you take that too far, you just recreate what you already had.
Yeah. When you lay over the fact that you're dealing with people, which means people always do what they really want to do. And then they will come up with a reason and a rationale afterward. We know this from brain science. They don't do the rational thing. They don't do the math problem and then do whatever the math problem indicates they should do. They go with whatever they feel. And it's, it's not, outside the scope of this conversation, but like you need to account for the whole person in that. If you want, if what you're going for is change in behavior, that's hard when it comes to a human. Yeah.
But you get the same thing with, as soon as they get into a panic state, an emergency happens, they're going to fall back on what's worked in the past.
They should.
They view that's the fastest path, right? Which is where coaching has come in so desperately at an organization that suddenly has a danger that they need to deal with. And their first impulse is go back to command control, go back to complete managed by management, right? By micromanagement, if you will.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a cautionary tale in here that, to go back to your question, business architecture versus software architecture, there's a bit of that organizational structure that's wrapped up in that we should explore ways to decomplexify that.
Not a word, but let me hit you with this.
Yeah.
Principles versus patterns.
Oh, simplify. Why did I not think of that word?
Well, because you had a chance to say
Decomplexify.
decomplexification.
I know.
And it
that
felt
sounds like
better.
such a good word.
I hear you.
I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, but absolutely. Number one. Number two, in terms of how to tell a compelling story that fits inside people's heads about how to go forward, what does a way forward look like? I have been playing with this idea of principles versus patterns.
Okay.
First of all, is that an obvious?
Please expand on that concept.
You got it.
Because something came to mind, but I want to know what that means to you.
Yeah, totally.
What means that?
To me.
Yes.
So in the spirit of not installing cargo cults and not installing frameworks that induce cargo cult behavior, boy, everything in life is a trade-off. It's easier if you have people, like if you have no idea what to do, you have to be kind of prescriptive, right? Stand up for 15 minutes, talk about whatever's on fire, then talk about whatever we can get done, right? And you give them a little bit of practice and a little bit of theory. High level for the organization, talking about transformation, whatever the heck that means. I've been talking about principles and patterns. And
Okay.
what that means to me is like principles are abstract guidelines, right?
Yes.
That guide the approach. And patterns are, the definition I got from Google was it's a proven solution to problems within a given context.
Sure. Okay.
So like the principle might be the team needs one source of work and one way to make decisions about priorities and answer questions.
Okay.
That's the principle. And the pattern, the instantiation of the principle. So the principle is sort of an abstract idea. That's a great idea. What do we do? The pattern, the way you instantiate it is have a product owner in Scrum, right? And have a product backlog and a sprint backlog. And now, if you tell me that you agree with the principle, but the pattern doesn't work because nobody can be the product owner, okay, and you insist you need two people to be product owner, well, it's not like that's against Scrum law. You're not going to be in Scrum jail, but your life is going to be harder look, it's not my business. It's not literally. Yeah.
Right.
But
So,
I understand
yeah, I
the trade-off
totally
is what
agree.
I'm saying. Make the choice you want, but understand what the choice is
Exactly.
Yes.
So don't dismiss it. Let's have a discussion about it. Again, it's what are you leaving behind?
Yeah.
Choose if you're going to work with offshore teams. Yes, you can do that. This is the price you're going to pay. There are known patterns and there are known to your point.
Yeah.
And there are known responses to those patterns and known results that we've seen over and over and over again when those patterns are put into place. So if you're willing to buy into the cost as well as the benefit, that if that calculus makes sense for you, then have at it.
Yeah. Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Because ultimately the final rule, even in Scrum, was do what makes sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, apparently there's I don't know if I've seen this, but I've heard people talk about the tendency in Scrum to over-rotate on empiricism. The idea that we will set up a Scrum team and we'll be totally non-judgmental about what works, and we'll just iterate our way towards what works well.
Oh,
Versus, and the idea being that, if all you have is empiricism, then you have no way, to make a prediction. Theory is what allows prediction, right? And so
Sure.
basically,
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
you need
Yeah,
data, you
I'm
need
with you.
empirical data, right, to understand what's going on in reality, and you need some theory to organize that data in a way to make a coherent explanation, and then allow you to predict what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah. So, you still have to, the thing in Agile, I think, is to say experimentation, to say that we are using empirical data to make a hypothesis of what could change, what we could affect, to change that empirical thing, and then we set up an experiment. What will we do to affect that end result? How will we know it worked? How would we know not to do that?
Here's the distinction.
Try it.
Totally. Here's the distinction I think that we should make. The empiricism and the sense and respond is really, it should be focused more on the product, meaning we have a valuable business outcome. We want to build a product. We want to get some outcome. We don't know exactly what we need to do to create that outcome. That's where the empiricism and the sense and respond comes from. The idea of how should the Scrum team work, you've got a bunch of theory already about that. Like, it's not, I've seen places where they're like, well, maybe this kind of team structure would work. Or maybe if you put people in these kind of structures, it would work. It's like, well, we actually run that experiment. We've got a bunch of data. We've got the Dora books. We've got a bunch of surveys every year about Agile. We've got a bunch of, benchmarking and stuff. And it's like, yeah, actually, you want the theory. There's a danger that you'll reinvent many wheels if you don't take the known good patterns to bring it back.
You know what's funny though? I mean, think about all the Scrum classes you've ever taught or teams that you've worked with. And you always start them at the same place. You don't start them with a pattern that you airlifted from another organization, Spotify. Right? So you're giving them the basic starting point. Say, let's get the skill set down, and now we can open up the door for experimentation and tailoring, right? And how many times have you even tried to protect someone against a pattern you know is bad, and they say, no, we're different. And they always grab the hot thing. They always grab the hot thing.
Yeah, and I am not that person's father. I'm not responsible. I'm not their guardian. And so I'm like, it goes back to what we were just talking about. Like, if you know the trade-off and you're making that deliberately, by all means, run that experiment. Just be prepared. I'm going to make a prediction that it might go bad in this way, and cap the downside risk is the way I like to talk about it. Like, here's what I think might be the worst thing that could happen. Can you tolerate that? If yes, then if that happens and you learn from it, awesome. Moving on. If not, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they just have to learn the example or learn
totally
the lesson for it.
Yeah, but like if the lesson
because
involves
these are
them
patterns, they're trying stuff that has always worked for them, or they think has always worked for them. Has always worked.
Yeah. And again,
right?
It goes back to some people have never been have never seen Agile work.
Right.
And so they don't know what they're missing. And so they're like, well, they're leaving a bunch of opportunity on the table in terms of if they did the work to set this thing up to run that experiment. That's sort of heartbreaking.
And in a theory of constraints way, you could look at it and say, yes, you're right. In the past, in your prior working model, that response was an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
But in the state you are now, that response may take you down instead of taking you up.
I love that idea of bringing all those, because theory of constraints, flow, lean, what we talked about earlier, there's a lot of stuff that could be potentially the right tool for your particular situation. I'm a big fan of bringing in those kind of things. Absolutely.
Yeah. I like when all the little niceties that you hear somebody say something, you go, there is truth in that. I like that. I'm gonna keep bringing it up, and we just string all this truth together.
Mm-hmm. Truth bombs.
So,
well, it feels like
I feel like this has been drained.
Me too.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
This has been. You go.
No, you go.
It's been an Agile thing.
It has been.
This has been an Agile thing.
I've been Matt Beam. Who have you been?
I've been Mike Markey, and together we have been the people on this Agile thing.
Yeah, minus Jeff Singleton. He'll be here next week. Let's assume.
He'll be here at some point in the unspecified future.
Very good.
Again.
All right. Bye, everybody.
All right, folks. See you next time.
Farewell.
And that's the end of this Agile thing.